Manufacturing made America's middle class before the bottom fell out.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
100,000 to 7,000?
Now, in many towns and cities, food service is becoming a major economic engine.
I get the feeling this is a place where you see lots of regulars.
Yes, it is.
But one that thrives on low pay and few benefits.
It's literally a slave wage.
You're a two-income household, and yet you're having to rely on a food bank.
Yeah.
Barely anybody's making enough to live.
That 14% of the people, of the residents of Howard County, deal with food insecurity.
Clearly there's a lot of need.
Leaving much of its vast and growing workforce struggling to put food on the table.
I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks. My mom didn't have to, you know what I mean?
How do you survive?
I don't know how I do it some days, honestly, but I have to.
More coffee? You're welcome. Everything okay?
Hot soup, hot soup. Betty, you want any more coffee, huh?
I can't get over how cheap everything is here.
I know.
It's like these prices haven't changed in the 45 years you've been open. I would love the Belt Buster.
Okay, the breakfast?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Breakfast House in Kokomo, Indiana has been around since the city's heyday as a manufacturing hub.
I get the feeling this is a place where you see lots of regulars.
Yes, it is.
And how long have you been here?
It'll be 42 years in March.
42 years. So without getting too personal, are tips enough to make a living off of?
Yes, yeah. Like I said, I've been doing it for 42 years.
Uh-huh.
So,
And you're living comfortably?
I don't have any complaints.
Uh-huh.
You know, I don't have a new car every year or whatever, but you know,
Yeah.
I do all right.
Yeah.
Hamburger steak?
Oh, thank you. Do you think it helps the fact that you know your customers? They
Oh,
might
yeah.
be a little bit
Oh,
more
yeah,
generous
I
with you?
think so, yeah. I mean, there's some that come in here and, you know, they're real nice and all, but they don't leave anything. You know, there are some that just that way.
But generally, you feel like if you're a good server, you'll get good tips.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
In 2009, Kokomo's unemployment rate spiked at about 20%, and it became known as one of America's fastest dying cities.
Throughout town, it's hard not to walk 5 feet without seeing some of the relics of the manufacturing industry that really drove the economy, not only of this town, but of this country. And it's all kind of relegated to the past.
But today it's recovering, with unemployment around 3%, and one of the businesses that's hiring is restaurants.
This is so fascinating from up here. You can kind of see the economy in transition. Like off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming, but most of them are just kind of abandoned. And then you look over here and you see strip malls.
Cheryl Graham works for the local United Way and has seen the shifts in the labor market firsthand.
So these are all factories here on
This
the
is the
left.
casting plant, Kokomo casting plant. It is a premier in the world. I mean, they make the best casings in the world, the most casings in the world. This is a transmission plant. This is Kokomo Transmission.
So there are still lots of manufacturing jobs here.
Lots of manufacturing, but in reality, going from early part of the middle of the 19th century to now, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
100,000 to 7,000?
In 60 years, I'd say, yeah.
And it's effectively been replaced by shopping centers and restaurants.
Shopping centers, service industries, small factories.
It's not really an equal exchange, is it?
No, restaurant work used to be part-time, something the kids could do. Brought in extra money, and now people have 2 or 3 jobs in that type of an industry.
In contrast to the union jobs with good salaries and benefits once offered by manufacturers, take-home pay for those working for tips isn't always guaranteed. Cassie Redmond moved to Kokomo about 6 years ago. Her husband works full-time at a food packaging plant, and she works as a server 4 days a week.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Washington State.
How did you end up here in Kokomo?
Better life. I had gotten a job through staffing at a factory, and it was paying pretty good, $10 an hour, getting like 50 to 60 hours a week, so that's not bad. But I was still nursing, so it was really hard. So I got my husband on at the job, and then I quit, and he stayed working there so I could be at home with our daughter.
Your husband is fully employed. How are you doing financially?
We were living paycheck to paycheck. He was bringing home $500 a week. So I found a job in a restaurant to become a server. First time ever being a server.
Are you still there?
Nope. I left like being busy the entire shift, and at the end of the night have $60. That was crazy to me. I knew I was worth more than that. I knew I could make more than that somewhere. So I finally went out to Carmel, which is like 45-minute drive away from where I live, one way. And I got the job out there. They're richer out there. They spend money. They don't care about spending money.
So the tips are better.
Tips are way better. You get at least 20%. So you're making anywhere from $10 to $20 per table. Versus at my old restaurant, I'd have to wait on 6 to 10 tables to make $20.
The federal minimum wage in the U.S. is $7.25 an hour, but there's an exception for employees that earn tips called the tipped minimum wage that allows restaurants to pay as little as $2.13 per hour in 15 states.
Thank you so much. So how long have you worked as a server?
12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
Nikki Books is a single mom with an 8-month-old boy.
I love serving. I love getting to know people and, interacting with people, especially like having an 8-month-old child. Like the only people I get to interact with is when I'm at work. Other than that, I'm interacting with an 8-month-old all the time.
So you're working as a server now.
Yes.
What do you get per hour as a wage?
In Indiana, you make $2.13 an hour.
$2.13 an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
You don't see a paycheck. Your paycheck literally says, "This is not a check." It says $0. This is not a check.
Because it just goes to taxes. Mm-hmm. So basically, you're starting at zero. On average, what do you get per hour on tips?
I would say, on average, I walk out with maybe 10 to 12% of my sales. Okay. When it's customary to tip 15 or 20, for good service.
How much would you say you're walking out with each night?
I mean, that varies too. During the week, it's not nearly as much. Like this week, I walked out with like $20 one night and $35 the next night. And then like on the weekend, I made like $75.
So even on a good night, if you break down hourly, you're barely hovering above even the minimum wage, like the federal minimum wage of $7.
Right. And you have to tip out, I mean, most restaurants is roughly 3 to 5% of your sales. So like even if people are tipping the 20% that is standard for great service, most servers are tipping out 3 to 5% of that to bussers, hosts, and bartenders.
So even if I'm generous and I leave 25%, you as a server are not seeing 25%, you're seeing 20%.
Roughly 20, yeah.
What if I leave you nothing? What happens?
Then we have to pay that tip out whether you give us money or not. So like say your bill is $100 and I have to tip out 5% and you don't tip me at all, I'm paying $5 to wait on you out of my own pocket.
Does that happen?
Often.
Often?
Yes. I would say it probably happens at least once a shift.
How do you survive?
I have a roommate. And I live with my brother and we have a roommate. And so right now I'm only paying 1/3 of the bills. I don't know how I do it some days, honestly, but I have to. I mean, so I used to donate plasma, but I've had surgeries in the past 6 months, so I can't even donate plasma anymore.
You were donating plasma to get by.
Uh-huh.
In the past 2 decades, while manufacturing jobs have declined 25%, the food service sector has increased jobs by 50%.
The restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in America. It's almost 14 million workers. 1 in 11 American workers currently works in restaurants. 1 in 2 Americans has worked in the industry at some point in their lifetime, and yet it continues to be the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States.
I'm trying to make sense of that. The industry grows because there's profit.
Right.
There's possibility.
That's right.
But the people who are actually working, who are essential to that particular industry, are seeing none of that return.
That's right. That is purely political and historical, because there's a very powerful trade lobby in this industry, the National Restaurant Association. We call it the other NRA. And it turns out, in doing research, this huge lobby that represents the chains, the Applebee's, the IHOPs, it's been around 150 years in various forms since emancipation of slavery. Turns out that tipping as a practice originated in feudal Europe. It was something that aristocrats and nobles gave to serfs and vassals, but always on top of a wage. When the idea came to the States, the restaurant lobby demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves, mostly black women, not pay them anything, and have them live entirely on this new idea that had just come from Europe called a tip. And so there was a mutation of that point from tipping as an extra or a bonus to tipping as the wage itself.
You said Rudolph?
Oh, how sweet, Bubba. You love him? Give him a hug too, Bubby.
Federal law does require restaurants to ensure all workers get paid the full minimum wage and make up the difference when tips fall short. But from 2010 to 2012, the U.S. Department of Labor found that out of over 9,000 investigated restaurants, 84% violated wage and hour laws.
So there are some who would say, you're working 4 days a week, anywhere from 25 to 35 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't survive off your tips, maybe you just need to be a better server. Maybe you're just not good at what you do.
That's pretty ridiculous, because we're only getting paid $2.13 an hour, and we rely completely on what people give us on top of what they're paying for their bill. And you can work your butt off and give them the best service they could have ever hoped for that night. And if they feel like only giving you a $5 tip on a $50 bill, then that's all they're gonna give you. You can't go back to them and be like, I deserve more. Most things I go to garage sales for things that we need. I buy a lot of used items because it's a lot cheaper. So pretty much everything in my house is used. It's not new. I've not bought anything new unless it's like a pair of shoes here and there for like work. The clothes I have are either given to me or they're the same clothes I've had for the past few years. My children's clothes I get handed down to me from friends of that have kids that are about the same age or a little bit older. I really work the resources and we still struggle. So this is my budget book or my ledger. My husband gets paid weekly, and each of those paychecks I write down the different bills. We got rent, gas, electricity, internet, phone bill, car insurance, car payment, kids insurance.
It adds up.
Yeah.
Something that really, really strikes me as I look at this, so you forecasted out a month and a half in advance where your expenses are, all based on what your husband brings in, because he brings in a full salary. Like, you know exactly what he's bringing in what week. You haven't put anything for food though. You can't negotiate rent.
Nope.
Right? Rent is rent. Car is car. Insurance is insurance. Food, maybe we're going hungry this month. Maybe we're eating less. Is that something you have to think about?
Yep.
So food is like the last thing that you're expensing
The last
for.
thing I think of, because it's whatever we have left will go towards it. That includes going to food banks. We base what we're gonna eat, what we get out of food banks.
A 2014 report found that of almost 300 surveyed restaurant workers, nearly 1 out of 3 were food insecure.
Oh
the sun is shining. It's 18 degrees. Wonderful.
David Luft helps stock local food pantries with donations from wholesale stores.
Feed America does a number of studies. They're one of the national groups. And their most recent study of Indiana and the 92 counties, Howard County, Kokomo is located in, ranks the third worst, if you will, in terms of food insecurity. And 14% of the people, of the residents of Howard County, deal with food insecurity. And so you have a choice every month of how you're going to spend those few discretionary dollars that you have. And in some cases, they just can't afford the things that they'd like to have. And that's not luxury items, that's just the basics. But we're doing our part. In 2018, in that calendar year, we served over 9,100 family units, households, in 2018 through our pantry, which is amazing, which is up about 18% from the year before. This is where Sam's does a lot of its loading and unloading. How you doing this morning? Gary, right? Yeah. I figured it out. It only took a couple weeks. What did you say that word? Yes. Yes. Good work, Gary. Good work. Potatoes on their way. Woohoo! Thanks, Nicole. Yes, potatoes.
As of 2014, it was estimated that 1 out of 7 people in the U.S., around 46 million, rely on Feeding America's network of 200 food banks and 60,000 partner food pantries. The food pantry in Kokomo provides much needed assistance in the area, but to make sure there's enough to go around, each person or family is only able to use their services once every 30 days. Cassie Redmond received a special holiday gift card for the pantry worth $100 to use at a local supermarket. She's using it to subsidize her family's Christmas dinner.
I go for the cheapest, even if it's not the tastiest. Found the jackpot. Normally $42, only $10 today. That's amazing. We still already spend over $100 every week, and that's going to food banks. Like with 2 kids, a husband that works, me, it's really, really difficult to make it every week. You know what I mean? Like, the prices keep going up, but our wages stay the same, and it's like our budget has to keep increasing because we can't live off of what we used to be able to live off of.
As powerful as one lobby may be, 213, I think, would strike most Americans as outrageous.
Outrageous.
How has this continued on?
It is the Restaurant Association and their cronies and their allies in Congress and in 43 state legislatures that have managed to keep wages as low as humanly possible. I do think it's important to recognize, you're right, it's unconscionable. It's literally a slave wage. I do think it's important to recognize that this is a 70% female workforce. And so I do think, in thinking about how has a wage stayed at $2.13, when you're looking at an industry that's majority female, you understand that basically the nation has valued these women at a $2 wage.
So as you see it, there's no real separating the fact that this is a largely female-driven industry, and the wage discrepancy is what it is.
That's right. Management and ownership is overwhelmingly male. The workforce is overwhelmingly female. And these are the lowest income women in America.
As of 2014, 1 in 6 restaurant workers, or about 16%, live below the poverty line, 10 percentage points higher than the national average. Many have to rely on government assistance to supplement their wages.
I hate the cold. I don't know why I live somewhere where the air hurts my face.
Nikki is enrolled in the WIC nutrition program for women, children, and infants, which helps pay for formula and other essentials for her 8-month-old child.
Why do they only have one and they don't have the bigger ones? I would say if I had to buy all the formula, like if I didn't get WIC at all, it would probably be about $150 a month just for formula, not counting food. And diapers are not cheap. Just having a kid in general is not cheap. Oh, these are adorable. They're little baseballs. After I paid my babysitter on Wednesday, I made $10. After I paid her on Thursday, I made $20. Friday, I think I made $60. Saturday, I made about $70. And then Sunday, I made $70. But if you think about it, that's not really that much. Like, you're not even pulling a $300 weekend. And that's supposed to support you and a whole other person. If I have to buy him formula and that's all I have money for, then I will live off cereal, because cereal's pretty cheap, and ramen, because ramen's extremely cheap. Or if I have to live off the McDonald's dollar menu. My life is not about me anymore, it's about him. And he's the best part of my life. He's the one thing that gets me through every day. But kids, they grow so fast. They need clothes, they need food, they need diapers. And those are things that you can't just go without. If I don't have the money, I just put it on my credit card and hope that I make enough to pay off my credit card.
So what do you say to critics who may say, look, the industry is what it is. This is the wage. Tips are, as you said, unstable. You may get a great tip one day and maybe not a great tip the next. Then find another job.
I would say a lot of different things. First, I would say this is the largest and fastest growing industry in America. These are the jobs that are now available. Lots of other sectors have declined or left the states. These are the jobs that are here to stay, number one. Number two, thousands, millions of these workers take great pride in their work. And it is not impossible for a restaurant to value these women, these workers, as the professionals that they are.
We essentially have a two-tiered wage system.
That's right.
In the U.S. How many states have a federal tipped minimum wage?
So over the last 80 years, since federal law said these workers could be paid zero, we've seen 7 states move away from this system. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Minnesota, Montana, and Alaska all require the restaurant industry to pay a full minimum wage with tips on top. Now, if you listen to the National Restaurant Association, you might think those 7 states have no restaurants, because their argument has been, if you force us to pay a wage, the industry will collapse, wages will be lost, restaurants won't survive. On the contrary, these 7 states actually have higher restaurant industry sales per capita, higher job growth in the restaurant industry.
Based on data from 2013 to 2015, in states that paid tipped workers $2.13 an hour, almost 1 in 5 waitstaff workers were in poverty. But in states where $7.25 an hour was guaranteed, that number was lowered to about 1 in 10.
A lot of people will have like thousands of dollars in their savings because that's their life savings. Our life savings right now is about $400. And that's if an emergency happens. If a car breaks down and we need to tow it, and that tow is going to be $100, that way we're not dipping into rent or gas or a phone bill.
So what you call your life savings, you're driving down the highway, your car breaks down, or you get a flat. It's easily $200, $300, $400.
Mm-hmm.
Your
especially if it's on the weekend.
Is gone.
Mm-hmm. We have to start over. I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks. My mom didn't have to, you know what I mean? Like she was a single mom and worked at a insurance firm or whatever, just filing, and she was able to do it. And nowadays it's like, you have to have 4 incomes in one household to just like be comfortably living, like having cars that run, not having to go to food banks, not having to, wake up early in the morning so you can go to sit in a food bank for 3 hours to get enough food to last you a week. So it's pretty sad.
Not everybody has a degree. Not everybody can get a 6-figure job or even
a $50,000 a year job. Barely anybody's making enough to live. The reality is you have older people working in fast food because that's the only job they can get because they never got a college degree, or you have, you know, people serving because they like to serve and they need the flexible schedule and the cash every day. So I think that people just need to end the stigma of, oh, you chose that job, but like sometimes people don't. It's what they can get. I feel like there are a lot of people who just don't grasp like the concept of it or understand that that's our livelihood, like that we really don't get a paycheck. And then they want to blame it on the employer, but they're, like I said, they're paying it somewhere. They're either paying it in the inflation on the food if they were paying us all a livable wage, or they're gonna pay it on the tip. It really is terrible that you have to rely on other people essentially for your livelihood, your bills, the clothes on your children's back. Like, it's crazy.
Hey, thanks for checking out CBSN Originals on YouTube. If you want to watch more documentaries, download the free CBS News app on your phone, tablet, smart TV, or any streaming device. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking down here. Thanks for watching.